Hi, I'm Chuck Dorset for Weaver Leather Supply. Let's make 3 versions of a wristlet keychain from the same simple pattern, and along the way, we're going to get a look at some beautiful leathers. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links there, going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's take a look at a very simple pattern. We've got a very simple pattern to work with here. We'll look at a digital pick here shortly, but here's what we're doing. So we've got our strap, we've got 2 holes on one end and 1 on the other. All right, so on this end, with our 2 holes, that's going to be our bend back. We're going to use a trigger snap on 1, split ring on 2, and then right here, the last hole, that's for our wrist. Now on the first, we're going to secure that with a rivet. On the other 2, we're going to use a Segma snap so we can connect this to things other than ourselves. All right, so over to our digital pick, 3/4 of an inch wide, 14 3/4 of an inch long. From our left, we're going to come in 1/2 of an inch to our first hole. We'll give our bend back there 2.5 inch spread. For our wrist, 11 inches, and then on this end, 3/4 of an inch, we'll give that a tab because that's where our snap's going to be. Now, big point, your project, your call. Make this any width, any length you want to. We're going 11 here. That's a pretty big loop, but I'd like to be able to easily slide that over my fist. Now, on 2 of these, we'll add a snap, not an issue. All right, so let's step over to our main table. Let's work on our first design. For our first version, let's go with our American Bison. This leather is beautiful. Been dying to use this for a project. It's got a good rustic look, waxy feel, a little bit of a pull-up effect. Now, we've got this in 2 different weights, 3 to 4 ounce and 5 to 6. Either would work for this project, but we're going to go with the 3 to 4 ounce. And 2 colors here. We've got a chocolate and then the saddle. That's what we'll be using. So, we need 14 3/4 by 3/4. And let's cut to size 14 3/4 long. Good. Now, that's not even going to go to waste in my shop. I will use that somewhere. Okay, let's mark for our 3 holes. Okay, let's go over to our punch table. Let's knock this one together. Couple of punches in a rivet and we're done with this version. So first off, with our 3 holes, what I'd like to do, this is a great revolving punch. This has got replaceable tubes, so as those wear out, we can replace those. But it's a good solid tool that actually helps us punch our holes. So what I'd like is a smaller hole because I want that cap or that post a little bit snug in that hole. That's going to give it a good bite with good durability. And our last, okay. Now, next up, we don't have to have this tool. We can always just clip the corners, but this makes all the difference. Some round end punch, we've got this in multiple sizes, all the way up to 2 inches. So we've got a 3/4 inch here. And there we are. Very nice touch, all right? Let's reset, add our rivet. Let's go with a double cap rivet. It's one of my favorite rivets. This is the smallest, or technically the 1/4 of an inch, and let's go with the antique copper. That's going to look good on our Bison. Right here, we've got a lanyard snap. Now that can be confusing because in leather, a lot of the clips are actually called snaps. Now on this, we've got the 3/4 inch, and we're going with the antique copper. So let's slide this on between our 2 holes that are closest together. I'm going to take my post and I'm going to come through from the face to the back. All right. Now, the bend back, this piece is going to go next, and then the piece on our face. Yeah, there we go. And let's go with the cap. One of the things I love about the double cap rivets, we can snap the cap on without actually setting it. That's a big help to us. And our setter. This is actually part of our 4-piece setter set. It's a good buy for us crafters. We can set Segma, line 24, line 20, and rivets. So let's set that. And there we go. Simple, rustic, looks good. Now, a great point here. If we're doing any craft shows or craft fairs, the Bison, that's a good selling point. Okay, next design. Let's move a little bit more towards fashion. One of the toughest decisions in this video is picking a leather. So many possibilities. Well, right here, this is our embossed floral. The black and purple, one of my favorites. That's called plum. Then we've got a black and gray. That's called our smoke. Now, this is a 2 to 3 ounce. So it's a little bit thin for our wristlet. What we're going to do is line this. The perfect choice there. This is our red rock. It's supple. It's a 3 to 4 ounce. So that's going to make a nice combination. Not going to be too heavy or too thin. And even in the red rock, we've got all kinds of beautiful colors. And we're not even going in to all of our beautiful prints. It's a hard decision, but I'm going to make a call. We're going to go with the smoke and the black red rock. I'm going to reset here. Let's cut these two. We're going to use contact cement to glue our face to our backing, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. The reason I bring that up is because we're going to glue the two pieces together. Then we're going to cut to size. So what I need here is I'm going to cut a 2-inch by maybe 16-inch piece out of each piece of leather. Now, with our thinner leather, new blade, sharp blade every time. We've got those two pieces. Okay, let's reset, add some glue. We've cut our two straps far wider than we need. But if we're going to make one, let's go ahead and make two. It'll take the same amount of time. And the more we make, the less waste we have. So we're going to use contact cement. This is going to make our two pieces look, feel, and react as one piece of leather. Now with this, we've got to add this to both pieces. We'll glue these together, then we'll trim to size. What'll happen is that we're going to have a perfect cut on our edge. It's going to look like it was die cut, as opposed to trying to line up 2 3/4-inch pieces. That's almost impossible, okay? So, our S18, love this contact cement. Now, like I said, we're going to need contact cement on both pieces, and let's do our best to get right up to the edge so we don't have any air pockets. So what we can do, let's scoot that right to the edge of our table. There we go. Let's just brush off. We're not going to get any glue on the top grain or the face of the leather. And we've got good coverage on both pieces. Okay, let's give it about 5 minutes. Let that glue set. With our contact cement, what we're looking for here is it looks dry and it feels dry, but it's tacky. So let's lay these together. Now we're going to trim to size. We don't have to try to get that edge to meet perfectly. But let's lay that in. Good. Very nice. Now with our small roller, let's just roll that. Make sure we've got a good connection there. And there we are. That looks good and it feels good. Okay, let's trim to size. Here, particularly, new blade or sharp blade every time. So let's start by trimming off about 1/8 of an inch. Very nice, and that's what we're looking for. Look how clean that edge is. That's beautiful and so easily done with the contact cement. Okay, so now let's cut out 2 at 3/4 of an inch. Very nice. Okay, let's step over to our punch table, mark and punch. Marking a dark or black leather or leather with a print, almost impossible. But we've got a leather marking pen. This makes all the difference in the world. It will rub right off if we're marking edges. Now, for our Segma snap, we're going to need 2 different size holes. For the cap, we're going to need a larger hole, and then down here, we're going to need a smaller hole, more like a rivet hole. So let's mark that. So on our rivet, let's go with a smaller hole. This will make sense once we see the snap, okay? On the other end, we need a larger hole. This will work, but I'd like to go a little bit larger. This is a round hole punch, a drive punch. So let's go with a 3/16 inch here. Good. And last, just like we did a while ago, let's do our round end punch. Okay, we've got that. Now, we're going to put a stitch line into this. We're going to sew this on a machine. But if you're not familiar with hand sewing, we've got some great videos here. Super easy and not nearly as tedious as you would think. Something like this, probably about 20 minutes to hand sew. It's going to look just as good as a machine stitch. But let's step over to my shop, knock a stitch into this with our Weaver 303. Now, funny story. I shot this, sewed our original, didn't have good focus. So we're going to go with our alternate to sew with, then we'll jump back over to our original. But I love the 303. I've been sewing with this, I think 6, maybe 7 years. I've yet to experience an issue. For those of us that want to jump into sewing with an industrial machine, easy to thread, easy to maintain, and exceptionally easy to sew with. So let's get a good line up here. And there we go. Let's sew this. And look at that, how easy, smooth, and consistent. And this is going to give us a beautiful stitch line. And let's overstitch about 4 holes. And there we are. There we go. Clean, even, consistent stitch line. A little bit hard to see the black, but nonetheless, that looks good. I love to hand sew, but that's hard to argue with. Okay, now we're going to switch back to our original. This step is not absolutely necessary, but I'd like to knock off that hard edge. Now, neither leather here is going to edge well. So I'm going to go with the number 1, and I'll sharpen this best I can. Let's just do our best. There we go, just to take off that hard corner. There we go, not perfect, but that does help. And let's do the same on the back. And again, a leather that's not necessarily going to edge well, but let's at least take a little bit of that edge off. And there we go. Okay, let's knock this one together. Let's go with a Segma snap. In my opinion, it's one of the easiest snaps to set. Now, we've got 4 pieces with this. So we've got a cap and a socket. Those two go together. Then we've got a post and a stud. So let's start here with our post, where we've got our 2 holes closest together. I'm going to come through from the top grain. Let's flip that over. Now, let's add our split ring, because I'm so bad about forgetting to do that, and that is very frustrating. Let's bring that around. Good. We're going to add the stud on top of that. So let's put that right here, the smallest indent on our anvil, sink that down. Now, right here, we've got 2 setters. So we've got an inset and a post. Right here, we're going to use the inset for the stud. There we go. How easy is that? And it looks good. All right, on the other end, we're going to come through from the liner, Let's force that through. Like I said, we want a little bit larger hole on that. There we go. Let's press that down. Now, in our second indent, that's for our cap. Let's drop that in. Now I've got the setter with the post. And there we are. Good looking snap. And there we go. Bites every time. Okay, that looks good. One more version. Let's add a stamp design. For this version, let's go with a 4 to 5 ounce natural veg tan. In fact, this is cut from one of our single shoulders. To me, one of the best buys for us crafters. It's a good size piece of leather, affordable, but it's a good quality tannage. Notice the flesh side on that. Very clean. That's what we're looking for. Now, on our wooden strap cutter, we're familiar with this pattern, so I'm going to strap, then I'm going to cut to size, and then mark. Now, on our wooden strap cutter, I wouldn't necessarily say new blade or sharp blade every time, but when we put a new blade in this, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So I've got this set at 3/4 of an inch. Yeah, how smooth, clean, and even is that? Yeah, that's the easiest of the 3 versions to strap. Good, we're marked there. Let's go drop in our holes and our round end punches. Now that we've seen a Segma go together, makes more sense. We need the smaller holes down here and a larger hole up here for our cap and socket. So on the smaller holes, and then on our larger hole, 3/16 inch round. And then over to our 3/4 inch round end punch. Very nice. Okay, let's prep this to get ready to add a stamp design. We could simply wet our leather with a sponge, give it about 15 minutes, and then stamp. But we're going to do it the right way. We're going to case this leather. So here's the process. We got a great video on this, but the high points. I'm going to wet my leather. I'm going to let it lay out, let some of the excess moisture evaporate. Then we'll put it in a baggie, give it anywhere from 3 hours to 5 days. We're going to pull that back out, let it air dry to a point where it's starting to return to its natural color. The point here is consistency. In fact, I've got a piece of leather right here. So right here, I've cased the whole piece, but I've over wet this piece. Notice how that stamp, it's very mushy, not what we're looking for. And if I cross over, notice mushy, crisp and clean, and then a good cased piece, we've got a consistent stamp across that. That's the point of what we're doing here, all right? Now it's 4 to 5 ounce. It's gonna get wet pretty quick. We can't over wet this. That just means we need to let it sit out longer before we go to the baggie. So let's just run this through. And there we go. Okay, I feel like I've got some good moisture in that. Let's let that sit right there. Let's give that about 45 minutes. We've given this about 40 minutes, give or take. Now it's starting to feel dry, but I can feel that moisture content. So now let's roll this up and put this in a baggie. And again, the point here is consistent moisture throughout. That's going to give us the best opportunity for a consistent stamp. All right, I'm just going to leave that for about 3 hours. 3 hours, give or take. Let's take this out because now I'm certain that we've got consistent moisture all the way across that. Very nice. So now, let's leave this out. It's 4 to 5. It's going to dry out pretty quickly. So let's go maybe about 20, maybe 25 minutes. Let's get this to start to return to its original color. And that's about 20, maybe 25 minutes, starting to return to its original color. I can feel it. The body's returned. It feels a little bit moist, but it doesn't feel over wet. Good. Let's go drop in a stamp design. Let's go with a very simple, very clean stamp design. We're going to use a camouflage tool. It's a common tool in most every shop. We're going to use the smaller tool because we're going to line up on both sides facing each other. It's going to make a nice design. But let's start here. Let's go with our wing divider, and I'm going to set this at 1/8 of an inch. Let's give ourselves a good guideline. Good. We can work from that. Okay. With our stamp, we're going to do our best to try to get these exactly across from each other. So let's start right here. We can start just about anywhere. Yeah, look at that. Our case leather, we get a good stamp. It's easy to drop that stamp in, but we can see every detail. All right, let's flip our strap around. I'm going to do my best to get that exactly opposite. Let's butt right up against our guideline. Yeah, there we go. Now I'm going to work my way in both directions. Now what I have to be cautious of, so I'm going to try to put the very corner of that tool in the previous stamp. And it's not too terribly tough to do. The problem is, on this side, as we work down, if we're not paying attention, this can stretch or contract, and we're going to get off a little bit. So let's just do our best, about every third, maybe fourth stamp, just to check that we are straight across from the other stamp. Yeah, there we go. There's our design. I love it. Again, very simple, very clean. All right, going to work my way down on both sides. And we've got a good stamp. We could certainly work our way around the corner, but it's just going to get too busy down there. That actually looks great. I'm one of the folks, less is more, and that absolutely fits that bill. Now, we need to give this a good, say 10, maybe 12 hours dry time. We want it completely dry before we add our dye. So I'm going to leave this overnight. We'll pick up in the morning. Ample dry time. And our design looks good, very nice. Now we're going to go with an edger. Number 1, Master Tool edger for a 4 to 5 ounce. I'm going to edge all the way around the face and the flesh side. Now it's always hard to edge around a small round end. Let's just do our best. Good, we've got that now on the flesh side. Never going to edge as easily, but let's do our best to knock off some leather so we can round and slick our edges. We've got that. We are ready to add some dye, so I'm going to reset here. Let's do that next. Let's go with our light brown in the Pro Dye because we're going to come back in with an antique. It's going to darken it a little bit. It's really going to make that design pop. We've got some gorgeous colors in this. The red, the blue, the green, they're all beautiful. But the Pro Dye is the only dye I use. Now we're going to dip dye this. In my opinion, fastest, cleanest, easiest, and most consistent way to add dye. The downside, we're going to use about twice the amount of dye. But the savings and headache and cleanup and speed makes it absolutely worth it. So what I'm going to do is just run this through my dye bin. Good. Let's tap it against the edge. Let some of that excess dye drip off. And there we go. Let's lay it out. Now, typically with the Pro Dye, you can tell it wicks in before we can even lay this down. But I like to keep a rag just in case I've got some dye pooling. Let's just wipe that off. Okay, Pro Dye, let's give that about 45 minutes dry time. Our project is dry and it looks good. Now, one big point with the Pro Dye, we've got to have good ventilation in our shop. But also, notice, with our dip dyeing, I almost don't even have dye on my gloves. Easy way to go. Now, as this dries, it can look a little bit splotchy. Don't panic. Just give it time to fully dry. And last up, this hook, I use this to drag our leather through the dye. That's just cheap wire from any hardware store. Good thing about this, we can drag that through our die and we can take it straight from the die bin, simply hang it somewhere in our shop. We're going to have much faster dry time. Okay, so we're going to jump over to an antique. We're going to go with the medium brown. We don't want to take this down too much, but before we do that, let's do this. The one thing that to me looks absolutely terrible is to get antique wrapping around to the back of our project. So let's take just some simple painter's tape, and I'm going to lay this across the back and just trim the tape to size. And that doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. We're just trying to keep that antique from wrapping around the back. It's a little easier without the gloves on. So, okay, let's reset here. Now, with our antique, what I want to do is I'm going to come across this with a cotton rag. Then we'll come back in with a dauber because it's not going to get any darker once we hit our top grain. So let's just go, again, just a cotton rag, and let's just add our antique. And with antique, this is absolutely the last stop for a pair of gloves and a rag in my shop. Okay, we've got the top grain covered. Now let's come back with a dauber, see if we can work that antique down into our stamp design. And I think we've got that worked in. Okay. And if we miss a few spots, we can simply come back in again. It's not going to get any darker. And I think I've got antique down into each one of those stamps. Now, one good idea, if we're going to add antique, it's usually a good idea to come back in and punch our holes after we antique, simply because that antique can get down in those holes. But in this situation, doesn't look like it's an issue. Now let's hit our edges. We've got that. Now let's just clean off the excess. And let's go back over our top grain again. Good, we've got that. Okay, let's give that about 20 minutes, let that dry. One more step, and all we have to do is knock this together. I've taken our tape off. Good. No antique wrapping around, that's what I want. Now it's a little bit flat. We're going to take care of that with our top coat. This is our leather balm. It's my favorite top coat. Don't need ventilation here. Now it's going to give us a little bit of a lower gloss, but it's really going to make this color pop. Now with this, I'm going to apply this with a piece of fleece. Smaller project, doesn't much matter. But a piece of fleece is really going to take in a lot of the leather balm. So if we have a much larger panel, this will absolutely take care of it. Now the one thing I don't want here is streaks and bubbles. We'll be able to see that, but let's just come in easily across this. And then maybe just one more pass. And nice, let's give that maybe about 5 minutes, let that dry. And just a couple of minutes, we can see that start to dry. Now let's step over to just a soft cotton rag, and let's just buff this out. There we are. Now, this is going to lighten up a little bit more as it dries, but that looks good. Pretty color, nice gloss, okay? Now let's step over to our edges. Let's hit our edges. Come back, wipe off the excess, and now, with our slicker, I'm going to go to our smallest cut there, and let's just work this back and forth. Pressure, not the point here. I don't want to push so hard that I develop a small lip. I just want to get a nice rounded edge with a good slick to it. Good, now let's come back with our cloth, and let's just hit that again. And there we go. I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up, but we've got a little bit of a gloss to that edge. It's rounded, it's smooth. Very nice. Even darkened a little bit. That looks good. All right, let's knock in our segment, our split ring. We're done here. And yet another decision. Like I said, our problem in leathercraft, it's not a lack of options. It's an overabundance of, well, first off, one of my all-time favorites, I love the antique nickel on a darker brown. Antique brass, that's just a classic look. Now, I'd love to go with the black. Love that. Here's the downside. Somebody didn't order in their Segma snaps. Yeah, I'm not going to point fingers, but I do work by myself. All right, so how about we go with our antique brass Segma. Now, we've seen one of these go together, so let's make sure we get our split ring on there. Well, that looks very good. I love all three versions. Let's get another look. I love the Bison. Well, first off, good selling point, but rustic, feels good, got that waxy finish on it. We can go with a snap, a split ring, or both. Now, one good point on this, right here, if we're going to close with a rivet, we can always trim off some of that tab. Now, these two, a little bit stiff, but those are going to soften up nicely with a little use. But I think those just look great. Nicely done. I've always said there aren't enough hours in the day for us to make everything we want to make with leather. We've got one simple pattern here, but with all the beautiful leathers we have at Weaver, the colors, the textures, the combinations, that's about 10,000 versions of this one pattern. No kidding, I did the math. So I guess we better get to work making something beautiful. Good luck with your projects.